When I received the calendar invite for a project realignment discussion with my manager, Kevin, I knew something was off. In my 3 years at Helios Tech, I'd never heard that phrase before, and the fact that Lauren from HR was included didn't help ease my suspicions. The Seattle morning was particularly gloomy that day, raindrops sliding down the floor-to-ceiling windows of our office as Kevin cleared his throat. "Victoria, you've been a valuable member of the Aurora project, but we're restructuring the team to focus on a new direction." I sat there, gripping my coffee mug too tightly, as he explained that I was being moved to what they called auxiliary support. Corporate speak for, "We don't know what to do with you, but we can't fire you yet." The project I'd poured my heart into for 18 months was being handed over to the new Golden team, led by Ethan, who'd been hired from one of our competitors 6 months ago. "We think your talents might be better utilized in a different capacity," Lauren added with practiced sympathy. "This isn't a demotion, just a reallocation of resources." I nodded professionally, asked appropriate questions about transition timelines, and somehow managed to keep my voice steady. But inside, I was cycling through disbelief, anger, and that particular flavor of shame that comes with professional rejection. Walking back to my desk after the meeting, I passed the glass-walled conference room where Ethan was gesturing enthusiastically to the Aurora team, my former team. Megan caught my eye through the glass and gave me a small, apologetic smile before returning her attention to their new leader. At 32, I'd thought I was established enough in my career to avoid these kinds of setbacks. My performance reviews had always been strong. I'd contributed key components to our product architecture. Yet here I was, suddenly an outsider to the project I'd helped build. "They're making a mistake," said Zoe, my closest work friend, when we grabbed lunch at the nearby deli. "Everyone knows you understand the architecture better than anyone." "Apparently not everyone," I replied, picking at my sandwich. "Ethan has Kevin convinced that the whole system needs to be rebuilt with his approach. His approach that conveniently positions him as the savior?" Zoe rolled her eyes. "Classic. The worst part is that I can see the problems they're going to run into. The data reconciliation issues alone will set them back months if they go with his design." Zoe studied me over her soup. "So, what are you going to do? Look for another job?" It was the logical question. In tech, being sidelined often meant it was time to update your LinkedIn and start taking recruiter calls. But something made me hesitate. "I don't know yet," I said. "I'm still processing." That evening, my apartment felt particularly empty. I'd moved to Seattle for this job, leaving behind friends and family in Chicago. My life had gradually organized itself around work. The team happy hours, the weekend hackathons, the sense of building something meaningful. Now, that center had disappeared. I opened my laptop and started typing out my frustrations, which gradually evolved into technical notes. I knew exactly where the bottlenecks in our system were. I understood the data flow issues that caused our weekly reconciliation failures. More importantly, I had ideas about how to fix them, ideas that Ethan had dismissed as too complicated without truly understanding them. The rain continued to pour outside as I worked late into the night, my fingers flying across the keyboard. What had started as venting was transforming into something else, a detailed blueprint for a solution. Not out of spite, not to prove them wrong, but because solving complex problems was what I loved doing. And suddenly, I had nothing but time. My new role in auxiliary support turned out to be as underwhelming as I'd feared. I was assigned to monitor performance metrics and troubleshoot minor issues in legacy systems. Busy work that required maybe 3 hours of my actual workday. The rest was a strange limbo of looking engaged while having nothing meaningful to do. "How's it going over in Siberia?" Zoe asked when we met for coffee in the break room, using our nickname for the forgotten corner of the office where they'd relocated my desk. "Cold," I replied with a wry smile. But quiet. Very, very quiet. What I didn't tell her, or anyone, was that this silence had become valuable. The blueprint I'd started the night of my demotion had evolved into what I privately called my shadow project. While monitoring system alerts with half my attention, I was using the rest to build a proof of concept for the solution I'd envisioned. It started small. I created a simplified model of our data flow and implemented my reconciliation algorithm on anonymous test data. The results were promising. Reconciliation times reduced by 87% in my initial tests. But a model wasn't enough. I needed to prove it could work at scale. Each day, I would complete my assigned tasks efficiently, then return to my shadow project. I stayed late when necessary, coming in early when I had a breakthrough I was eager to implement. My apartment became a secondary workspace, with whiteboard notes covering one wall of my living room. "You seem better than expected," commented my sister Grace during our weekly video call. "Last time we talked, you were ready to set fire to that Ethan guy's prized desk plant." I laughed. "I've found a better use of my energy." "A new job prospect?" she asked hopefully. "Not exactly. Just a project of my own." Meanwhile, trouble was brewing in the official Aurora project. I heard snippets of frustration in the hallways. Deadlines were being missed. The reconciliation issues I'd predicted were indeed causing problems, with the finance team growing increasingly vocal about inaccurate reports. During one particularly tense all-hands meeting, I watched Kevin struggle to explain the delays to upper management. Ethan spoke confidently about anticipated growing pains and necessary architectural adjustments, but I could see the doubt creeping into our CEO's expression. After 6 weeks of dedicated work, my shadow project had evolved into a functional prototype. I'd built a specialized microservice that could sit alongside the existing architecture, intercepting and processing the reconciliation requests without requiring a full system rebuild. It was elegant in its simplicity, requiring minimal changes to the current code base while solving the critical bottleneck. The question now was what to do with it. I could approach Kevin, but he'd made it clear he trusted Ethan's vision. I could go over his head to our CTO, but that kind of move could burn bridges I wasn't ready to torch. As I deliberated, fate intervened in the form of a company-wide hackathon. The theme was efficiency innovation, projects that could improve our internal processes. Participants could work alone or in teams, with final presentations to the executive team. "You should enter," Zoe said when she stopped by my desk to share the announcement. "Show them what they're missing in Siberia." I stared at the email, my mind racing. Maybe I will. That weekend, I refined my prototype, polished the documentation, and prepared my presentation. This wasn't about revenge or vindication anymore. This was about building something valuable, something that could genuinely help the company and our clients. If nothing else, the hackathon would give me a platform to share my solution with people who might actually understand its potential. When Monday came, I submitted my entry. Adaptive Reconciliation Engine, ARE, a non-invasive solution for data alignment issues. Then I waited, both nervous and strangely excited for the first time in weeks. The day of the hackathon presentations arrived with unexpectedly beautiful Seattle weather, clear blue skies that seemed like a good omen. The event was held in our largest conference space, with teams setting up demo stations around the perimeter and a presentation area at the front. I arrived early to test my setup one last time. My station was in the far corner, away from the main traffic flow, fitting for someone from auxiliary support. I arranged my laptop, connected the external monitor, and set out the one-page overview sheets I'd prepared. As people began filtering in, I recognized members of the executive team moving from station to station. The CTO, Nathan, was taking his time at each demonstration, asking detailed questions. I tried to calm my nerves by reviewing my talking points again. "So this is where you've been hiding," came a voice, and I looked up to see Megan from my old team. She glanced at my display, which showed a visualization of data flows with and without my solution. "Not hiding, just working," I replied with a small smile. "I've missed having you on the team," she said, lowering her voice. "Things aren't going well with the reconciliation module. Ethan keeps saying it's just a matter of fine-tuning, but we're weeks behind schedule." Before I could respond, Nathan approached my station. "Victoria, right? Let's see what you've been working on." For the next 15 minutes, I walked him through my adaptive reconciliation engine. I explained how it identified pattern mismatches in real time, applied context-aware rules to resolve conflicts, and maintained an audit trail for compliance. I demonstrated the performance improvements with actual test data, showing reconciliation tasks that previously took hours completing in minutes. Nathan asked sharp, technical questions that indicated he understood the complexity of the problem. When I showed how my solution could be implemented without disrupting the existing architecture, his eyebrows raised. "This is addressing the exact issue that's delayed the Aurora release," he said, more to himself than to me. "How long did this take you to develop?" "I've been working on it in my spare time for about 6 weeks," I answered. "In your spare time," he repeated, giving me a thoughtful look. "And you're currently on auxiliary support," I supplied. He nodded slowly. "I'll be interested to see your presentation." As he moved on, I noticed Ethan watching from across the room, his expression unreadable. Kevin stood beside him, frowning slightly. The presentations began after lunch. I was scheduled near the end, which meant I had to sit through 12 other demonstrations first, my anxiety building with each passing minute. Most projects were interesting but incremental improvements, workflow automations, UI enhancements, internal tools. Finally, my name was called. As I walked to the front, I saw Zoe give me a subtle thumbs up from her seat. I connected my laptop to the projector and faced the room of colleagues, many of whom I barely knew anymore. "I'm Victoria Phillips, and I'm presenting the Adaptive Reconciliation Engine." My voice came out steadier than I expected. For those who aren't familiar with our reconciliation challenges, let me start with a brief overview of the problem. I walked through the presentation I'd rehearsed countless times, explaining the technical concepts in accessible terms, demonstrating the solution in action, and highlighting the business impact: reduced processing time, improved accuracy, and significant cost savings. "In conclusion," I said, coming to the end of my allotted time, "this solution can be implemented as a companion service to our existing architecture, requiring minimal changes to the current codebase while resolving our critical reconciliation bottlenecks. Thank you." The applause was polite but subdued, typical for a technical presentation. As I returned to my seat, I noticed Nathan leaning over to speak with our CEO. Ethan was typing rapidly on his phone, his expression tense. After the final presentation, the executives retreated to deliberate on the winners. The rest of us mingled awkwardly, snacking on the provided refreshments and discussing each other's projects. "That was brilliant," Zoe said, handing me a coffee. "The look on Ethan's face when you showed the performance comparison was worth framing." "I'm not trying to make enemies," I said, though I couldn't help feeling a small flash of satisfaction. "I just wanted to solve the problem." "Sometimes solving the problem is the best revenge," she replied with a grin. When the executives returned, our CEO took the microphone to announce the winners. Third place went to a creative marketing automation tool. Second place to an impressive security enhancement. Then came the moment of truth. And our first place winner, with a solution that addresses one of our most pressing technical challenges, announced the CEO, is Victoria Phillips with the Adaptive Reconciliation Engine. The applause was louder this time, with a few whoops that I suspected came from Zoe. As I accepted the small trophy and gift card prize, Nathan pulled me aside. "I'd like to discuss implementing this solution," he said quietly. "Can you come to my office tomorrow morning?" I nodded, speechless with surprise and vindication, as colleagues I hadn't spoken to in weeks came up to congratulate me. Across the room, Kevin and Ethan were in what appeared to be an intense conversation, occasionally glancing my way. For the first time since my realignment, I felt visible again, but more importantly, I felt reconnected to the work I loved. Nathan's office had a panoramic view of the Seattle skyline, the Space Needle visible in the distance. I sat across from him, trying not to fidget as he reviewed the documentation I'd provided. "This is exactly what we need," he said finally, looking up. "The Aurora project is 6 weeks behind schedule, primarily because of the reconciliation issues. Your solution could get us back on track." "I'm glad you think so," I replied carefully. "The question is how to implement it." He leaned back in his chair. "Normally, I'd ask you to work with the Aurora team, but given the circumstances, that might be complicated." I took a deep breath. "With all due respect, if my solution is going to be implemented, I want to be part of it. I understand the problem space better than anyone. Nathan studied me for a moment. I agree, which is why I'm reorganizing the project structure. I'm creating a new reconciliation task force, reporting directly to me. I'd like you to lead it. My mind raced. Lead it? You've demonstrated initiative, technical excellence, and persistence, even when sidelined, he said. Those are leadership qualities. Plus, it's your solution. You should guide its implementation. Before I could process this unexpected turn, he continued, I'll need you to select 3 to 4 engineers to join your team. The Aurora release is still a priority, so we need to move quickly. What about Kevin and Ethan? I asked, unable to ignore the elephant in the room. I've already spoken with them. Nathan's expression was neutral but firm. The Aurora project will continue under their leadership, but the reconciliation component will transfer to your team. They've been instructed to provide full cooperation. I left Nathan's office in a daze, clutching the official project charter he'd drafted on the spot. In the span of 24 hours, I'd gone from overlooked support staff to heading a critical initiative. Zoe was waiting anxiously at my desk. Well, what happened? When I told her about the task force, she practically squealed. This is the best corporate revenge story ever. You have to let me on your team. I laughed. You were the first person on my list. The next few days were a whirlwind. I selected Megan from my old team, who was eager to jump ship, Zoe for her database expertise, and Derek, a quiet but brilliant engineer from the infrastructure team. We were assigned a dedicated workspace, no more Siberia, and given priority access to the resources we needed. Our first official meeting with the Aurora team was as awkward as expected. Kevin avoided eye contact, while Ethan maintained a strained professionalism. We've reviewed your solution, Ethan said stiffly, and while the approach is unconventional, we're prepared to support the integration. Great, I replied, equally formal. We'll need access to the current reconciliation module and the test environment. Megan already has context, but we'll need your team's expertise on the recent changes. As the meeting progressed, the initial tension began to ease as we all focused on the technical challenges. By the end, even Ethan was engaged in a productive discussion about API endpoints with Derek. Over the next 3 weeks, my team worked intensively to refine and implement the adaptive reconciliation engine. We encountered obstacles, of course, integration points that were more complex than anticipated, performance issues that required optimization, resistance from certain stakeholders who disliked change. But we also had breakthroughs. The first time we ran a full reconciliation cycle in the test environment and saw the dashboard light up green across all metrics, the team broke into spontaneous applause. When the finance department tested their reports with our solution and reported 99.8% accuracy, Nathan sent a company-wide email commending our progress. 6 weeks after the hackathon, we deployed the adaptive reconciliation engine to production. I stayed late that night, monitoring the system as it processed its first real-world data. When the morning reports generated without a single error, I finally allowed myself to acknowledge what we'd accomplished. The official Aurora project launch followed 2 weeks later, meeting its revised deadline largely thanks to our contribution. At the celebration event, I found myself approached by colleagues from across the company, many congratulating me on the task force's success. Kevin sought me out near the refreshment table, looking uncomfortable but determined. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. I made a judgment error in removing you from the team. As we all make mistakes, I replied, surprised at how little vindication I felt. The anger that had driven me initially had been replaced by something more constructive. Later, as I was about to leave, Nathan stopped me. The reconciliation task force has been so successful that I'm making it permanent, he said. We have other systems that could benefit from your approach. I'm recommending you for promotion to Director of Data Integrity. I walked home that evening instead of taking my usual bus, needing time to process everything. The Seattle skyline glowed against the darkening sky, raindrops beginning to fall lightly, the familiar pattern that had become home. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Drinks to celebrate the new director? Whole team is in? I smiled and replied affirmatively, quickening my pace. The past few months had taught me something valuable. Sometimes being pushed aside creates space to build something new. Sometimes the path forward isn't the one you'd planned, but one you create yourself when no one's watching. As I rounded the corner to meet my team, I realized that what had started as a project born from frustration had become something much more meaningful. Not just a technical solution, but a reminder of my own resilience. Not just a career recovery, but a genuine step forward. Sometimes when you're removed from the main team, you find the freedom to build what they didn't know they needed all along.